Would it help if I look more solicitous? Solicitous, my... For you people getting this on cable TV, we understand that in some cities you're only getting half of what we're taping each night. And to tell you right quick, the first half that we're taping is made up of reading what is known as Kairouts. It says, and Kairout said in this collection tonight of 87 pages of stories, parables, one-liners, all sorts of little things. And as they're being read during the first half of the program, off camera on a screen is flashing the page number, and those here in the studio audience who find one to be somewhat intriguing to them or perplexing, or perhaps their hand slips on their pen, they will write down that page number, and then it's collected on a master sheet. That's capital M, capital S. Master sheet, not master, well, master sheet. For those of you of autoerotic inclinations, master sheet. And what was I saying? And then I look at them, see, I look at the number, and then, of course, I'm, so to speak, hearing these at the same time you do, and Kairout is off stage, sometimes in the prompter's box. And I look at this, and I read the one, and then see if, in some way, the spirit of Kairout moves me. Either that or I have ants in my shorts or something, and I try to make some additional comments, so here we go. Do you understand that? If so, write me. Not now, but sometime. All right, here we go. First one is page 11. Some of these I may or may not comment on, see. And then I'll leave it to you to figure out why. Oh, the obvious one, for people just tuning in, well, he read it, and he doesn't know what the hell it means. He doesn't know what to say. But watch me cover it. I'll do something like, well, that is so patently self-obvious. What can we say? Huh? And there's still those that wonder if grammar school has any real purpose in life. Okay, and Kairout said, although the workers are used to the whine of the factory, this does not preclude their complaining thereabout. And there was a refurbished moral, referring back to the last couple of tapings, this one picking back up on one of them. A bird will not foul its own nest, but men will talk about themselves and then lament the prevailing palaver. It started, oh God, what's it been now? Several nights ago. And everyone knows the old proverb, I assume, that a bird will not foul its own nest. Kairout picked it up and had somebody, one of these illusionary speakers in the park or a penguin under your bed, or somebody says, a bird will not foul its own nest, but a man will talk about himself. A man will tell you what kind of guy he is. And I assume anybody who is really listening, you kind of put it together. I'm just guessing. Well, I'm about like you. I was sitting there and I heard it, and you kind of think, well, what it's inferring is that from a more unusual view, let's call it the revolutionist view, a man talking about himself, telling you what kind of guy he is kind of metaphorically, symbolically speaking, I should say. It's sort of fouling his own nest. As many of you probably have already had that sort of taste yourself, that there you are talking about yourself. And you suddenly think, Jesus, I wish I could shut the hell up. The whine of the factory is even now done into my bones and muscles and nerves. So, that was like the one step, that a bird will not foul its own nest, according to the old proverb, but a man will talk about himself. This sort of takes it one step where? Closer to Encino? I would say further. You can't get much, no. A bird will not foul its own nest, and yet a man will talk about himself. See, now we got a new stage, here it comes. And yet a man will talk about himself, and then lament the prevailing palaver. That is, that men, what do they do constantly? In case there's anyone who did not, I hate to act superior to you people, but some of you probably didn't have the advantage of finishing elementary school, so I'll tell you, prevailing palaver. It's like, man, everyone's talking about themselves, and then just while they're taking out a spare moment, when people are not talking about themselves, what is one of the, which is probably the most popular verbal hobby, what's probably the second one? Bitching about everybody talking about themselves. You mean I spent all that time for that? But men will talk about themselves and then lament the noise. You don't see? Well, back to the whine of the factory, it is the beautiful machinery, the vivus machina of life, runs in such a way that no matter what kind of fuel is going, no matter how smoothly they are running, no matter how they're purring along, the human intellect, sometimes known as one's individuality, one's personality, is arranged in such a way that if the car is not breaking down, if the intellectual, the personal vehicle is not in some way beginning to sound funny, beginning to knock, making strange noise in the transmissions, if you're just going along, then men will look around and complain about the noise of the highway. God is everybody else's noise. Listen, people ought to fix their muffler. You would not have your own car were it not for the noise. See? I know. Don't write and tell me that's irrational. What the hell are you doing watching this? Once the man, and Kairut said, once the man had been brought before the royal tribunal, etc., of righteous and reasonable inquiry, which they thought sounded better than the Inquisition revisited, he stood, this guy, before the judges and freely admitted, yes, I have talked to God, and no, I am not a fruitcake. Unless, of course, God too's, nuts. Which I don't know, I shouldn't talk for Kairut. That could have been the end. But, he puts, then they took a recess so that those among them who claimed to be serious could go off and ponder the matter. Those of you that accidentally thought you were turning on that Trinity Broadcasting Network and that this is some sort of religious show, I don't get y'all entangled and get your feet caught up in those. Some of the cages they build nowadays, I've seen some of the parakeets, I don't know, their foot, and so I don't want you to get caught up in this. Tweet, tweet. That is not religious talk. This has really nothing, if you can think, beyond the level of when you send in your money and get one of those faith healing cloths that I'm temporarily out of. Then I got to suggest to you that this really doesn't have much to do with God, but think about what God and religion has always represented, and in some cases still does, to people's mind. The great unknown. Some people are still stuck with God. Those that can't seem to work their way up to the great conspiracy theories or UFOs. You just kind of, when in doubt and nothing else to do, you have to fall back on God. So this guy, let us say at a, no offense, but a little more simplistic level, the man is interested in such matters that might be revolutionary. But this representing a large area of human history that somebody is still saying, well, I'm interested in God. That is the unknown. I'm interested in where man's future might lie. The rebel camp outside the city, which is not a retreat from the city, and it's not where the city is just not quite civilized. It's something else. It is the unknown future from any ordinary view. So he's saying, yes, I am interested in unusual things, but no, I'm not crazy. Unless the unusual things themselves are crazy. And if you're living in the city, then you're living by sequential logic. That is, you're living by polar-based energy, information which, number one, nobody asked for tonight, and Kairut said, polar-based knowledge is inherently unstable. How could it be otherwise? See, it's no offense, but anytime you think, if you were anybody, with an ordinary mind, the ordinary mind is dependent upon polar-based knowledge. That is, that whatever it's thinking is right or it's wrong. It's true or it's false. It's reasonable or it's unreasonable, but it's all polar-based, and it's unstable. Hence, you can be converted. Or if you can't be converted, hence, those who want to convert you will think real poorly of you and probably talk about you and your mama when you're out of the room. And if that don't work, it's known as, they do things, what do they call it? Kill each other. Wars. Fights. There is no such thing as stable, polar-based energy. But then, at least anybody thinks, well, wait a minute. If anybody was following that, any ordinary person think, well, wait a minute. There's the problem. That anytime you got convictions or beliefs, what we're calling polar-based knowledge, then you're just asking for what? A handout. No, trouble. You're asking for trouble, because if it's polar-based energy, it's such as saying, in other words, it comes out at a very simplistic, describable level, is like the either-or syndrome. It's like saying, all right, you people, you can be pointing some area, you people here in this part of around the Black Sea, you people have got to either be Christians or you got to be Muslims. That is polar-based energy. So you got the Armenians there who are, what, Christians, and they're saying, wait a minute. The Azerbaijans next door, the Muslims, if I got it right, those people are trouble. They're trouble now, they've always been trouble, and they could be more trouble in the future. We're to kill them, we're to convert them. It's unstable, but at least you think, well, there's the problem. If we could do away with polar-based information, thought, such as religion. If we had no sex, S-E-C-T-S, for those of you with that kind of funny mind that don't want to hear the master sheet said the right way. It is not that politically, economically, religiously, that there being an either-or situation is the problem, because, far be it from a problem, ordinary life would not continue were it not for the fact that information is unstable. How could you have progress? If information was stable, if, to take the old crude story, if indeed the great minds of the world, at least the Western world, prior to the 1400s, if they really believed that the world was flat, that'd be it. Columbus would have never discovered Ohio. We wouldn't be here. God knows where we would be. There could be no, even at the ordinary level, intellectual progress. I mean, it's just obvious. That is not the way the ordinary minds see it. They would see it as, well, the scientific approach must be somewhat open-ended. We must be broad-minded. We must be able to add to our storehouse of knowledge. I'll put it to you another way, or Kyrute did. Polar-based knowledge is inherently unstable. It's supposed to be. It can't be otherwise. But once you realize that, then you also realize that there's no sense trying to go fishing in a place where the lake won't stay still. If you're trying to be a revolutionist and you think, well, what I'm going to do is go read a book. Well, what the hell? I'm a big guy. I'll read a bunch of books. I'll go talk to somebody important. Oh, wait a minute. I'll talk to 2 or 3 important people. I'll get this down. It's unstable. I mean, you're looking in the wrong place. That is the nature of ordinary knowledge, but it is unstable. It cannot be otherwise. This guy in the story is sort of pointing out when he says, yes, I've talked to God, and no, I'm not a fruitcake unless God's crazy too. So what it, in essence, an ordinary mind we saying is, yes, I have tried to think outside the normal boundaries, but no, I'm not nuts unless this new thought is nuts. Of course, the dirty part in here, to twist symbolism back on itself faster than we can almost talk, is, of course, that kind of knowledge from the ordinary view of this tribunal would be nuts. But of course, they're not going to say that about God, because it says it's a tribunal of righteous and reasonable inquiry. We're assuming that they had some religious tinge, or at least the king is going to support religion. So if a guy says, yes, I've talked to God, but no, I'm not a fruitcake, but, unless God's crazy. Now, ordinary thought, to jump back to that version, is not going to say, okay, that could be. God could be nuts. If you're talking to him, he could be nuts. Can't do that. Now go away from religion, go to ordinary thought. Take the way I'm saying. The man could say, all right, I'm trying to think anew. I'm trying to push our frontiers of thinking and knowledge. And some of what I thought, I guess you people, it's the man talking to the panel. One man's mind talking to the city, talking to ordinary thought. One man talking to his own thoughts. He says, yes, what I thought before is unusual. I know that you guys think it's unusual because that part of my brain goes, whoo, what in the hell are you doing? But it's not crazy unless new thoughts are crazy. And the ordinary mind is not prepared. It is not arranged to go, yeah, it is crazy. It wants to in a sense, but it's not prepared to say it. So it kind of has to go off. Like, well, we'll go consider it. which is, of course, one way always out of any potential new thinking for a man to sort of accidentally, if it was possible, fall in to the grip of some insanity like this or fall under my spell. Your eyes are getting heavy. Heavy. God, if you got fat eyes, you ought to put those peepers on a diet. You will send me large. And Kairut read from the list of the secondary world's statements. Another one of the secondary world's statements of operations. Here's the statement. A thing with no name doesn't exist unless it can kill you. A thing with no name doesn't exist in the secondary world. It does not. Simply does not. Nothing does. God does not. Good ideas, bad ideas. Anything in the secondary world has a verbal base. And so the first part of the Kairut here, or the statement that he claims is from the secondary world's book, listings of operations. A thing with no name doesn't exist. That is, what would ipsit dixit be if it were squared? It can't exist if it doesn't have a name. But then there is the reality, the pressing nonverbal reality in one very direct sense of the primary world. Back to this. A thing with no name doesn't exist. That's true. Unless it can kill you. You understand? If it can kill you, it don't need no goddamn name. Yes, I don't believe in that. It doesn't have a name, or I don't agree with the name you people have for it. There is a new form. We have this thing that is known as fluorescent cancer. And a man thinks, I have been to school. In fact, yes, I'm a doctor. Yes, I'm a doctor. I am a doctor. Let's make it a little weird. I guess that sounds weird. But let's say a man says, some guy says, I believe that there is a thing known as UFO Contactee Cancer. That's all one term. That it happens that UFOs come in contact with you, and it happens many times when you're asleep at night and they fly into your bedroom and you don't know it. And if they get within radiation distance of you, you get this, quote, UFO Contactee Cancer. And a man says, hey, I am highly educated. What was I told? Oh, yes, I'm a doctor. There is no such thing as that. I mean, that is no legitimate name. I mean, you're a crackpot, obviously. You're the kind of guy that would talk to God. You know, so this guy says, speaking for this part of the Kairut, a thing with no name doesn't exist. So he's saying it has no name because this man, reasonable sequential thought, is saying that is no name. That's just an illusion. It doesn't exist. And according to this, it's true. A thing with no name doesn't exist, dash, unless it can kill you. See, and if it can kill you, let's say that this guy, I just had to go along since I made it up this far, that he is, I don't know, some kind of beans loose somewhere, that this thing about UFO, but let's say that it is some other form of cancer and they just no good name for it. We're talking about the primary world, so we're jumping from one to the other. A thing with no name doesn't exist unless it can kill you. See? And then it doesn't need a name. Can I suggest to you on behalf of Kairut, he says it's all right, that this has much more to do than actually killing somebody. Think about that which seems to press people and drive them in the secondary world, that which seems to be important to make people live a reasonable civilized life. They will only do that. They will only pursue that which has a name. Mortgage, fame, fortune, whatever. It's no big problem. But in one sense, it doesn't exist. And there have been people around that attempted to be pseudo-rebels, hermits, philosophers that go, well, I'm too smart for that. Right. They could say it's an illusion. And they could say, wait a minute. It's more than just an illusion. And if they could pull themselves together and have a certain kind of public charisma, they could go, wait a minute, and suddenly remember some book that they read a piece of having to do with Buddhism years ago. They went, yes, almost all of man's ordinary life is an illusion. It is meaningless to a man with the kind of cosmic metaphysical hunger that I have. The rest of the world does not exist. The common, mundane problems that seem to plague others will not bother me, except for there is a great inclination on the people who are so inclined to ignore the big O. Otis Redding? Obvious, the obvious. Which is the big P. Louis Prima? The primary. See, all right, one more version then, if I may. Is all right? Instead of just a thing with no name doesn't exist, how about this? Stuff in the primary world, stuff in the civilized world. The life of the city doesn't exist, except the parts that will kill you. Now, we have 3 fingers left. That's hardly enough to get even the first people in the first row here drunk. Okay, and Kyrut said, and I know this one sounded a little sticky when you heard it, but listen. A certain rebel said he had a method wherein he took all of the nouns that his old thinking, had taken to be proper and acceptable. The nouns. Could I hint maybe especially, well, remember, that includes proper names. The nouns, and he turned them into adjectives. Think about it. Think what that would do to your ordinary thinking about, especially, other people. That the nouns, that which the mind wants to identify as people, if you took the noun, just a method, and you turn them into adjectives. Come on. And Kyrut said, an agitated viewer writes, of course, you've got to been watching for the last few nights and all of the night. Having rats in your stores is bad enough, but what in God's name do you think would cause a penguin to believe he was on a holy mission? See, somebody just wanted to hear that one again. 60 seconds. All right, here's another one I know got a little sticky when you heard it, but I'll read it. And Kyrut said, the fact that throughout history, many otherwise intelligent, sophisticated men, no sarcasm, it's true, that otherwise intelligent, sophisticated, notable men in history have and continue to perceive civilization as going downhill can be seen in a certain way as simply additional evidence of how life itself, the full life, always moves faster than any ordinary individual in it can. Once you see that, then the constant pointing out by Kyrut and others about how people, that the ordinary mind is always convinced that life is going downhill. Here is part of it. That life moves so fast, that life moves faster than any ordinary mind can. That life itself. Bye. Bye.